Queen Elena sat upon her crystal throne, watching her 5 children through holographic displays. Prince David stared at tactical reports with rigid focus. Princess Anna moved through corridors with mechanical precision. Princes Henry and Oliver spoke in clipped, efficient sentences. Young Princess Lucy barely spoke at all. Trust was dead in the Valerian Empire. It had died 3 generations ago when an ambassador tried to assassinate the royal family. Now the palace was a fortress of isolation, attended only by robots and vetted officials. The queen's crystalline form reflected the cold light of the palace. She had made a decision long ago that no one could be trusted. Her children had grown up inside walls of protection so thick that even love had become difficult to express. Each of them moved through their days like pieces on a game board, following rules, never stepping outside the boundaries that had been set for them. Queen Elena remembered when things were different. When Prince David was young, he would laugh and run through the palace gardens. When Princess Anna would ask 1,000 questions about the world beyond their walls. Those days felt like a dream now, something that had happened to someone else in another lifetime. The assassination attempt had changed everything. An ambassador from a neighboring star system had hidden a weapon inside a gift box. If the royal guard had not been watching so carefully, the box would have reached the queen's hand during the ceremony. The entire family would have been destroyed in that single moment. From that day forward, Queen Elena had decided that trust was a luxury her family could not afford. She had built walls around her children and kept them safe inside those walls. Robots taught them mathematics and history. Computer systems showed them how to rule the empire. Guards watched their every movement. No one was allowed close without passing through layers of security checks. No one could get near them without being scanned and analyzed by machines that looked for weapons and lies. Prince David had become the first heir to the throne. At 28 years old, he spent 12 hours every day studying government reports and military strategies. He knew how to command soldiers and manage resources. But he did not know how to smile at someone without thinking about whether that person might be dangerous. He had never had a real conversation with anyone who was not a family member or a government official. Princess Anna was only a year younger than David. She had been taught to manage the royal household and to represent the empire at official events. She was beautiful and intelligent, but she moved through life like she was walking through a maze with high walls on every side. She could not remember the last time she had done something just because it made her happy. Everything she did had a purpose. Everything had to serve the empire. Princes Henry and Oliver were twins. They were 22 years old and they were supposed to become military commanders and scientific advisors to the Queen. Henry spent most of his time in the Weapons Development Center. Oliver worked in the research laboratories. They barely saw each other anymore even though they were twins. When they did meet, they spoke in short, efficient sentences about work. They did not speak about feelings or dreams or anything that was not practical and useful. Young Princess Lucy was only 16 years old. She was the youngest of the 5 children and had been born after the assassination attempt. Unlike her older siblings, she had grown up inside the walls from the beginning. She did not remember a time when she could walk freely through the palace. She did not remember what it felt like to trust someone. Sometimes she tried to talk to her siblings, but they were always too busy. Sometimes she tried to talk to the robots that served her, but they could only give her information. They could not give her companionship. The Queen watched her children move through their lives like ghosts. She had kept them safe, but she had also kept them trapped. She had protected them from danger, but she had also protected them from joy. She had built walls so strong that nothing could get in to hurt them, but nothing could get in to help them either. Every morning, Queen Elena woke up and told herself that she had made the right decision. Keeping her family alive was more important than letting them be happy. Protecting them was more important than letting them be free. She had sacrificed their happiness for their safety, and she believed that was what a good mother and a good queen should do. But sometimes, when she watched young Lucy sitting alone in the gardens, staring at nothing, the Queen felt something that might have been doubt. When she saw David's shoulders hunched over his desk at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep because his mind would not stop working, she wondered if she had done the right thing. When she noticed that Anna had forgotten how to laugh, and Henry had forgotten how to dream, and Oliver had forgotten how to be curious about anything except his work, Queen Elena felt a cold, empty feeling inside her crystalline chest. The palace was a beautiful place. It had high ceilings and gleaming walls. It had gardens that were carefully maintained by machines. It had libraries filled with books that no one read. It had rooms for music and art and dance, but no one ever used those rooms because no one remembered how to play. On this particular day, Queen Elena made an announcement that surprised everyone. Earth was sending a delegation to the Valerian Empire. This was a historic moment. Humans were rare visitors to this part of the galaxy. The Queen ordered that human workers be brought to the palace to help prepare for the visit. None of the royal family understood why the Queen had decided to do this. None of them understood that deep inside, in the part of her that was not a queen, Elena was hoping for something. She did not know exactly what she was hoping for, but she was hoping that something might change. She was hoping that somehow, someway, her children might remember how to be human, in the way that mattered most. The palace, which had been so quiet and so controlled for so long, was about to receive a visitor who would change everything. Robert arrived at the Valerian Palace on a gray morning. He was a man of 58 years old, with lines on his face that told the story of his life. He had worked in different places across the galaxy for 40 years. He had cleaned space stations and research centers. He had maintained hotels and hospitals. He had worked on ships and in colonies on distant planets. He understood how to fix things, and he understood how to watch people without them knowing he was watching. When Robert arrived at the palace, no one paid attention to him. He was just a worker, just someone who would clean the floors and fix the broken things. The guards at the gates barely looked at him. The officials who managed the palace gave him a uniform and a list of tasks. Then they forgot about him completely. This was perfect for Robert. He had learned long ago that when people did not notice you, you could see them clearly. You could see who they really were, not who they pretended to be. You could hear the real sounds in their voices, not just the words they were saying. Robert began his work early in the morning. He cleaned the crystal floors and polished the metal walls. He fixed the broken lights and replaced the water filters. While he worked, he watched. He listened. He noticed things. On his third day at the palace, Robert saw Princess Anna standing in front of the observation windows. She stood there for a long time, looking out at the city beyond the palace walls. Her hands were pressed against the glass. Her crystalline body reflected the light, but her eyes were dark and empty. Robert noticed that she was not really looking at the city. She was looking at nothing. She was looking at the space between things, the gap between the life she had and the life she wanted to have. Robert did not say anything to her. He simply continued his work, sweeping the floor in the corridor behind her. He hummed quietly, an old Earth song that his mother had taught him when he was a child. The song was about leaving home and finding new places. It was about freedom and distance and change. He hummed it softly so that it would not disturb her, but loud enough that she could hear it if she wanted to. Princess Anna turned around and looked at him for a moment. Then she turned back to the window. But Robert noticed that her body was not quite so rigid as it had been before. Something in the music had reached her in some small way. The next day, Robert saw Prince David in the war room. The prince was standing in front of a large display showing the military strength of the empire. David's face was tight and hard. His hands were clenched into fists. He was giving commands to his officers, and his voice was cold and sharp. Every word was like a knife cutting through the air. But Robert noticed something else. He noticed that David's voice got smaller and quieter when he thought no one was listening. He noticed that when David thought his officers could not see him, his shoulders dropped just a little bit. He noticed that David looked exhausted, like a person who had not slept in days because his mind would not let him rest. Robert understood loneliness. He had felt it many times in his own life. Loneliness looked the same on every being in the galaxy. It looked like someone trying very hard to be strong when there was no one there to help them be weak for just a moment. On the fifth day, Robert found young Princess Lucy in the library. She was sitting in a corner by herself, reading a book about Earth. She was concentrating very hard on the words, and sometimes she would move her lips, trying to sound out the words that were difficult for her to understand. She looked so young sitting there alone, surrounded by all these books that no one read. Robert was cleaning nearby when Lucy looked up and saw him. For a moment she seemed afraid. Then her fear turned into curiosity. She asked him a question in a soft voice. "Do you know about Earth?" she asked. Robert smiled. No one ever asked him questions. People usually just gave him orders or ignored him completely. But Lucy was asking him a real question, a question that came from her genuine interest in something. "I do," Robert said. "I am from Earth. I was born there a long time ago." Lucy's eyes became wider. "Will you tell me about it?" she asked. "If you want to know," Robert said. They talked for only a few minutes because Robert had to get back to his work. But in those few minutes something changed. Lucy spoke more words than she had probably spoken in weeks. She asked questions. She listened to his answers. And for the first time in her life, someone listened to her when she spoke, really listened, not just waited for her to be quiet. One morning, Robert was working in the library when he heard a noise. It was Prince Henry. The prince was struggling with a data terminal that had broken. Henry was trying to fix it himself, but he did not know how. He was too proud to call for help. He was the prince. He was supposed to know everything. He was supposed to be able to fix any problem by himself. Robert walked over quietly and offered a small tool without saying anything. He did not bow or show excessive respect. He simply held out the tool and smiled. Henry looked at him with surprise. Then he took the tool and fixed the terminal. Robert continued humming while he worked. It was the same Earth song, the song about freedom and distance. As days passed, Robert noticed more things. He noticed that Henry sometimes smiled when he thought no one was looking. He noticed that Oliver spent time in the observation room just staring at the stars. He noticed that Anna came back to the windows every day, and each day she stood there a little bit longer. Robert understood that he was beginning to see the real people underneath the royal titles. He was seeing their loneliness, their pain, their desire for something more. And he had not done anything except notice them and treat them like they were human beings who mattered. This was the beginning of something that would change the entire Valerian Empire, but Robert did not know it yet. He simply knew that he had a job to do, and he would do it with care. Everything changed on an ordinary morning in the observation chamber. The observation chamber was the largest room in the palace. It had windows that stretched from the floor to the ceiling, and through those windows you could see the entire city below. The sky was bright and clear. The sun was shining on the crystal buildings and the metal streets far below. Robert was standing on a tall ladder, fixing a light fixture in the ceiling. He had been working in the palace for 3 weeks now. Every day he had watched the royal family move through their lives like ghosts. Every day he had noticed their loneliness. Every day he had hummed his Earth songs and smiled at them when they walked by. But he had never spoken to them much. He had never tried to be their friend. He had simply been there, quiet and kind, noticing them in the way that no one else seemed to notice them. On this morning, Robert was reaching up to adjust the light fixture. His toolkit was sitting on the ladder next to him. It was an old toolkit, the kind that had been with him for 20 years. It had been with him to 17 different planets and 12 different star systems. The toolkit held everything he needed for his work. Wrenches and screwdrivers. Small metal pieces and cables. Everything was organized and ready to use. But Robert made a mistake. He moved too quickly to reach the fixture. His elbow hit the toolkit. The toolkit began to fall. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. Robert watched it happen in slow motion. The toolkit tipped over the edge of the ladder. It began to fall down toward the crystal floor far below. When the toolkit hit the ground, it made a sound that seemed to echo through the entire palace. Tools scattered everywhere. Wrenches rolled across the crystal floor. Screwdrivers landed with sharp clinks. Small metal pieces bounced and rolled in different directions. The sound was loud and shocking in the quiet palace where everything was usually so controlled and organized. For a moment there was complete silence. The kind of silence that comes after something unexpected happens. The kind of silence where you can hear your own heart beating. Robert climbed down from the ladder slowly. He was embarrassed. In the palace, everything was supposed to be perfect. Everything was supposed to be controlled. And he had just made a tremendous mess. He expected someone to come running and tell him that he had done something wrong. He expected guards to appear and tell him to leave. But instead, something different happened. Robert began to laugh. Not nervous laughter or embarrassed laughter. Real laughter. The kind of laughter that comes from deep inside your chest. The kind of laughter that you cannot control. Robert laughed at himself and his clumsiness. He laughed at the absurdity of the moment. He laughed because sometimes when things go wrong, the only thing you can do is laugh about it. As Robert was laughing and picking up his scattered tools, Princess Anna appeared in the doorway. She had heard the noise. She came to see what had happened. When she saw Robert surrounded by his scattered tools, laughing at himself, something strange happened to her crystalline face. Something changed in her expression. A smile appeared on her face. Not the polite, formal smile that she showed to people at official events. A real smile. A genuine smile that came from someplace deep inside her. And then Anna began to laugh too. She walked into the chamber and picked up one of the tools. She handed it to Robert while she was laughing. "That was quite a sound," Anna said. "I am very clumsy," Robert said, still laughing. Prince David heard the laughter and came to investigate. He stood in the doorway for a moment, confused. He had never heard his sister laugh like this before. He did not understand what was happening. But then he saw Robert, covered in embarrassment and tools, laughing at himself without pride or shame. Something in David's chest felt different. Something that had been tight for so long began to loosen just a little bit. Henry and Oliver appeared together. They had been working in the laboratory nearby. They looked at the scene in front of them. They saw their sister laughing. They saw Robert laughing. They saw the scattered tools and the mess on the floor. And then, for the first time in years, both twins began to laugh as well. Real laughter. Not the controlled, careful laughter that they used in formal settings. Real, genuine laughter that shook their crystalline bodies. Young Lucy appeared last. She stood in the doorway and watched her older siblings and the strange human janitor all laughing together. For a moment she was confused. Then she understood. They were laughing because someone had made a mistake and was not ashamed of it. They were laughing because it was funny and real and true. Lucy began to laugh as well. All 5 members of the royal family stood in that observation chamber, laughing together. The sound filled the room and echoed through the palace. It was a sound that had not been heard in that building for many, many years. It was the sound of genuine joy. It was the sound of people connecting with each other without walls between them. When Queen Elena heard the laughter, she stopped what she was doing. She had been in her private chamber, studying government documents. She stood up and listened to the sound. For a moment she did not know what the sound was. She had not heard it in so long that she almost did not recognize it. She walked toward the observation chamber. When she arrived at the doorway, she saw her 5 children standing with Robert, all of them laughing together. For the first time since the assassination attempt, the walls around her family had cracked. Light was coming through the cracks. Joy was coming through the cracks. Connection was coming through the cracks. Queen Elena felt something break inside her crystalline chest. It was not pain. It was the breaking of walls that had held her family prisoner for too long. Queen Elena summoned Robert to her private chambers late in the afternoon. A guard came to find him while he was cleaning the corridors. The guard's face was serious and official. Robert felt a moment of fear. He wondered if he had done something wrong. He wondered if the queen was angry about the laughter in the observation chamber. Robert was taken through corridors he had never seen before. They were more beautiful than the other parts of the palace. The walls glowed with soft light. The floor was made of a special crystal that felt warm under his feet. Finally, they arrived at the queen's private chambers. Queen Elena sat on a chair that looked like a throne, but smaller and more personal than the one in the public halls. She was alone in the room except for Robert and the guard who stood by the door. The queen's crystalline form seemed to glow with a cold, sharp light. Her eyes were studying him carefully, analyzing him like a scientist studying a small creature under a microscope. "Leave us," the queen said to the guard. The guard hesitated. It was not normal for the queen to be alone with someone like Robert. But the queen repeated her command and the guard obeyed. He left the room and closed the heavy door behind him. For a long moment, Queen Elena and Robert simply looked at each other. The queen's expression was hard to read. Robert could not tell if she was angry or confused or something else entirely. Finally she spoke. "You have spent 3 weeks in my palace," she said. Her voice was measured and controlled. "In that time, you have somehow managed to do something that no one has been able to do for many years. You have made my children laugh. You have made them forget their duties and their responsibilities. You have made them forget who they are." Robert stood quietly. He did not know if he should speak or if he should wait for the queen to continue. "I want to know why," Elena said. "I want to know what you want from my family. What is your plan? What are you trying to gain?" Robert took a breath. He understood what the queen was thinking. She had spent so many years protecting her family that she had learned to see deception and danger in everything. She could not imagine that someone would simply be kind without wanting something in return. "Your Majesty," Robert said slowly, "I have cleaned buildings for 40 years. I have worked on 17 different planets. I have seen many different kinds of people and many different kinds of suffering. When I came to your palace, I recognized something in your children. I recognized loneliness." The queen did not move. She did not speak. She simply waited for him to continue. "I saw Princess Anna standing at the windows looking at nothing," Robert continued. "I heard Prince David's voice getting smaller and smaller as if he was disappearing inside himself. I noticed that young Lucy had forgotten how to speak because she had learned that no one listened when she tried. I saw all of these things and I recognized them because I have seen loneliness before. It looks the same on every kind of being in the galaxy." "And what did you do?" the queen asked. "I treated them like people," Robert said simply. "Not like royalty. Not like titles. Like people. I hummed my songs. I offered tools when they needed help. I answered Lucy's questions about Earth. I smiled at them. That is all I did, Your Majesty. Nothing more. Nothing less." Queen Elena's expression changed slightly. "You asked for nothing? No power, no position in the palace? No wealth or special treatment?" "I have nowhere to gain power here," Robert replied. He looked directly at the queen without fear. "I am a janitor, your majesty. I am good at what I do and that is enough for me. I do not need power. I do not need wealth. I simply needed to do my work and treat people with kindness." The queen stood up from her chair and walked to the window. She looked out at the city below, the same view that Princess Anna had been staring at for weeks. "When the ambassador tried to assassinate us," Elena said quietly, "I made a decision. I decided that trust was a luxury we could not afford. I decided that my children would be safer if they were isolated, if they were kept away from anyone who might hurt them. For 30 years I have kept my family safe inside these walls. But I did not realize what I was keeping away. I did not realize that I was keeping away more than just danger. I was keeping away joy. I was keeping away connection. I was keeping away life itself." Robert waited. He did not know what the queen wanted from him. He simply listened. "My daughter Lucy came to me this morning," Elena continued. "She was laughing. She told me about Earth. She told me about you. She told me that you were the first person who had ever really listened to her. Do you understand what that means? 16 years old, and no one had ever really listened to her before you arrived." "I am sorry for that," Robert said. The queen turned around to face him. "You did not create that problem. I did. I created a place where my children could not laugh, could not play, could not be themselves. And you, a stranger from another planet, fixed it simply by being kind." Robert did not know what to say. "I want to ask you something," the queen said. "Will you stay? Not as a janitor. Not as a servant. Will you stay as someone who teaches my family how to be human? Will you teach them how to trust again? Will you teach them how to live?" Robert felt something warm in his chest. This was not what he had expected. "I will stay, your majesty," he said. "For as long as you need me." The queen nodded slowly. "You came to my palace as a worker and no one noticed you. But you changed everything by simply being kind. That is the most powerful thing I have ever seen." In the months that followed, Robert moved through the palace not as a custodian but as something the Valorians had no word for, a friend to the royal family. The palace itself began to change. The walls that had been so cold and formal seemed to become warmer. Laughter echoed through corridors that had been silent for so long. The robots and officials who worked in the palace noticed the difference immediately. Prince David was the first to change. He had spent his entire life believing that a leader must be strong and never show weakness. He thought that showing emotion was the same as showing vulnerability, and vulnerability was dangerous. But Robert taught him differently. One day Robert found David alone in the war room, staring at military reports. The prince looked exhausted and sad. Robert sat down next to him and began to talk about his own life. He told David about times when he had failed. He told David about times when he had been afraid. He told David about times when he had cried because the weight of responsibility was too heavy to carry alone. David listened carefully. When Robert finished speaking, David began to cry. He cried because he had been holding everything inside for so long that he had forgotten how to let it out. He cried because someone had finally shown him that strength did not mean being cold and hard all the time. Strength could also mean being open and honest about your pain. After that day, David began to make changes. He started asking his officers for their opinions instead of just giving them commands. He started listening to people instead of just talking at them. He started showing his people that a leader could have feelings and doubts and questions, and that this did not make him weak. It made him human. Princess Anna began to change in a different way. She had learned to ask questions about everything, but she had learned never to ask questions about herself. She never asked what she wanted. She never asked what made her happy. She simply did what was expected of her and never questioned whether it was right for her. Robert sat with Anna in the gardens one afternoon. He asked her a simple question: "What do you want to do with your life?" Anna looked at him with confusion. No one had ever asked her that question before. She did not know how to answer it. Robert waited patiently while she thought about it. Finally, Anna said that she wanted to learn about art and music. She wanted to understand beauty instead of just understanding duty. Robert helped her understand that asking this question was not weakness. It was strength. It was the strength to know yourself and to ask for what you needed. After that, Anna began to spend time learning about art. She learned to paint and to play music. She learned to express herself in ways that had nothing to do with being a princess. She learned to be Anna. Prince Henry had built walls around his heart because he believed that laughter was not serious and was therefore not important. He worked in the weapons laboratory creating things that could destroy other beings. He thought this work was serious and important. He did not understand that laughter could be just as important as work. Robert showed Henry something different. One day while they were working together, Robert told Henry a terrible joke. It was so bad that Henry did not understand it at first. But Robert explained the joke and showed Henry why it was funny. Henry began to laugh. It was awkward laughter at first, like he was using muscles that had never been used before. But soon he was laughing freely. After that moment, Henry realized something important. Laughter was a bridge between beings. When people laughed together, they understood each other better. When people laughed together, they were connected in a way that work could never connect them. Henry began to spend more time with his twin brother Oliver. They began to laugh together and talk about things that were not related to their work. They began to become brothers again instead of just two people who worked near each other. Oliver learned his own lesson through Robert's example. Oliver believed that perfection was the most important thing. He believed that every experiment had to be perfect and every result had to be exact. If something was imperfect, it was worthless. If something failed, the failure was shameful. Robert showed Oliver that imperfection was human, and humanity was valuable. Robert showed Oliver his old tools, the ones that had been with him for 20 years. Some of them were scratched and dented. Some of them did not work perfectly anymore. But Robert used them every day because they had served him well for a long time. They were imperfect, but they were valuable. Oliver understood this lesson and changed his approach to his work. He began to see that failed experiments were not shameful. They were steps on the path to discovery. He began to see that imperfect results could lead to important understanding. He began to appreciate the process of learning instead of just focusing on the final perfect result. Young Lucy was the one who changed the most. She had never believed that her voice mattered. She had grown up in silence because no one had ever listened to her. She had learned to be invisible in her own family. Robert spent many hours talking with Lucy. He asked her questions about her thoughts and her feelings. He listened to every word she said. He responded to her ideas with genuine interest. He showed her that her voice mattered. He showed her that people would listen if she spoke. Lucy began to speak more and more. She started asking questions in family meetings. She started sharing her opinions about how the empire should be run. She started to matter in ways that she had never mattered before. She started to understand that she was important, not because she was a princess but because she was a person. As the months passed, the entire palace changed. The queen began to spend time with her children not as a ruler overseeing her heirs, but as a mother spending time with her family. She began to understand that protecting her children did not mean isolating them. It meant teaching them how to connect with others safely. Word spread through the entire Valerian Empire about the royal family and their change. People began to see their rulers as beings who could laugh and cry and make mistakes like everyone else. People began to trust their leaders more because their leaders became more human. Robert never became a member of the royal family. He remained Robert the janitor. But he was no longer invisible. He was respected and valued. More importantly, he had taught an entire empire that the greatest power in the universe was not weapons or wealth or control. The greatest power was kindness and connection and the willingness to see other beings as they truly were.